A lot of people are saying Spurs this season's over already. They're going to capitulate. They're going to fall out the top four now. That was their honeymoon phase. And yes, Maddison's injured. Van de Ven is injured. It's not looking great at Spurs. But Ange Postecoglu is a great manager. You've not seen much of Brennan Johnson yet. He's only had 300 minutes. You have not seen Bentancur really play yet. And Bentancur was one of Spurs' best players last season. So in today's video, we're going to talk about why you don't need to write off Spurs yet, how exactly Bentancur is going to thrive under Ange, how Brennan Johnson thrives under Ange, how they can fill in for Maddison's absence, and more. And as you can see, a lot of people have been talking about Spurs, saying, look, it's over now, the honeymoon period is over for Spurs, but I don't think it is. So just first of all, talking about Spurs, Maddison and Van de Ven is going to be a massive miss. And I actually think Van de Ven will be more of a miss just because of defensive depth. It's Dyer or Davies to fill in. Romero will be back soon. Whereas I think with Maddison, not that anyone can offer his creativity or output, but I think Brennan Johnson and Bentancur have the ability to fill in there. And I think Brennan Johnson complements Son well. So hopefully that partnership won't impact Son. Bentancur and Brennan Johnson are two players that will work very well under Ange Ball and are really suited to Ange Ball. And we're going to talk more about Bentancur because he's probably the guy that's going to make a bigger impact. But then I want to talk a bit about Brennan Johnson, how Spurs haven't really seen him yet and what he will add. And I think he's a very underrated player. There was a negative response when they brought him from Nottingham Forest. But I want to talk about why I'm a big fan of Brennan Johnson. I've been talking about Brennan Johnson for a year when he was at Forest and how I liked him. So I will talk about that. But we're going to get into Brennan Johnson. We're going to get into Bentancur first. Bentancur first. And then we will talk about Brennan Johnson. But as we know with Ange Postecoglu, he's a good manager. He's got one game a week coming up. So even with the injury crisis, I think he could surprise people. And look, you've got Vicario, you've got Son, you've got Basuma, you've still got a few core players. While Spurs' depth isn't the best, I actually think of midfield, they've got decent depth. There's always Lo Celso. I think Maddison's injury won't be the end of the world, but I think Mickey van der Ven will be missed. So let's talk about Bentancur. So as you can see here, this is Bentancur's FBref statistics. 99th percentile for non-penalty goals. He's very high in terms of shots, non-penalty goals and assists. He can offer a little bit of an outlook going forward, which nowhere near Maddison's level, but he can definitely help sort of fill in that Maddison gap. I think he'll ultimately replace Sarr when Maddison comes back. Passes attempted, high percentiles, but I think where he's known for is his progressive passes, 70th percentile, progressive carries, 84th percentile, successful take-ons, 90th percentile, and tackles he can put in a defensive shift. And what you've got with Bentancur is a guy that can play as a 6, guy that plays as an 8, guy that can play in the Maddison role, very versatile midfielder, and a guy that is good with the ball, good at progressing the ball at the pitch, can dribble, and Ange likes his players to run into space. He said that himself, and if Bentancur goes and finds a space and dribbles in there, someone will fill in for him, and Bentancur's going to have the freedom to be a lot more creative and aggressive, considering that Spurs played awful football last season, depressing football last season, and Bentancur was their second best player after Harry Kane. He's going to have a lot more license under Ange Postecoglu. It's going to take time to warm Bentancur up. He's obviously come back from a horrific ACL injury, but a lot of big players have come back from ACL injuries and still within a month or two of their return got back to their best. And I think going to Uruguay on international duty is a bit of a risk, but that means he's going to get more minutes in his belt ahead of coming back to Spurs, so he could be more match ready. So why will Ange Ball make Bentancur even better? Why does he suit Ange Ball? He's a creative player, he's a progressive carrier, he's a progressive ball player, he can put a tackle in. He's a guy that has an eye for creativity, has an eye for goal, and Ange Postecoglu is the type of guy that would rather win 4-3 and score more goals than win 1-0. And I think Bentancur offers a lot more creativity going forwards than someone like Sarr. And I think in the long-term plan of things, I think Ange Postecoglu will become a big fan of this guy. He was obviously their best player after Kane last season, and the football Spurs were playing last season was crap. I almost look at it and go, there were so many players that were crap last season for Spurs that Ange just made good. So imagine what Ange is going to do with the very few players that were good last season for Spurs. Going to make them even better, surely. And I think Ange football suits Bentancur. I think with injuries, we've seen that Ange doesn't change his style as well. Ange is very much like, I'm down to 9 men, I'm still playing my football. I've got injuries, I'm still playing my football. He wants to play his way. So even with lots of injuries, I think that Spurs will still play attacking football. And as I've said, he'll be given more freedom under Ange to progress the ball, carry the ball into space. We know that Bentancur likes to get the ball, he likes to dribble forward, likes to run at people. And Ange is very much like, if you see a space, Bentancur, go in there. Don't worry about your position, don't worry about your license. Someone else will fill in for you. That's the way the Spurs do. If the 8s go out, the fullbacks can kind of cover them defensively. That's how Spurs play. And I think now that Basuma's picked up in form, and Basuma looks like a completely different player last season. to last season. Like Basuma, I've always rated him. And when Spurs signed him, I did a video saying that this is a really good sign for Spurs. But this will also improve Bentancur, because I think people forget that it's not always about the player, it's sometimes about the players around them. You could be a great player, but if the players around you are crap and not giving you much, there's only a certain amount of things you can do. And while there's big injuries at Spurs, now that Basuma is the Basuma that we saw at Brighton, and being a midfielder like Bentancur, he's really going to benefit from that. Being, Maddison and Basuma in form around him rather than people like Skip, for example. No disrespect to Skip, but you know my point. It's sometimes about the system around the players. You could be a great player, but to be even better player, you need certain players around your system. I've always said this as a Man United fan. Man United brought Harry Maguire. 80 million. Not saying that Harry Maguire was ever worth 80 million. I'm not saying that Harry Maguire's that good. But we played Maguire with De Gea and Varane, two profiles that just did not complement the kind of player Maguire was. I've always said this, if you spend 80 million on Maguire, then you get a keeper that's comfortable coming off his line, and then you get a centre-back that's comfortable, that would complement Maguire, someone that's comfortable on the ball, that can cover a lot of ground. Never did that. Man United spent 100 million on Paul Pogba and put him with Fred and Bruno, players that didn't complement each other, And I always think, I think Harry Maguire and Pogba would have been better for Man United if Man United actually built a team around them and a system around them rather than just spend loads of money on big players. But we're not here to talk about United. But my point is, with someone like Bentancur, because you'll have a better Basuma around him, a good star around him, good players around him, and a better system around him, he should look like an even better player. If you're a good player in a poor system, you should be a much better player in a good system. And Spurs' system will continue even with injuries. And when Maddison's back, I think he goes into the star role. Now, what about Bentancur do we need to know? Progressive Barca, great at playing between the lines, which is what Ange wants in a midfielder. One of the best midfielders in the league for carrying and dribbling, and will help Spurs a lot in transitions to this counter-attack, which they may do more just due to defensive injuries, although Ange doesn't like to change his style. Long term, he's going to replace Sarr. He's more attacking than Sarr, and he will help Spurs break down those low blocks. He's definitely an Ange kind of player because he wants to get forward, influence the attack, make things happen. He can play as a 6, he can play as an 8, he can play in the Maddison role, he can just fill in where's needed. And Ange is going to give him that freedom to be more creative, be more aggressive. And I think we've seen Ange improve players. We've seen the system at Spurs improve. We've seen the players look better. And Bentancur, when back to full fitness, will be a big part of that. So that is what Bentancur brings to Spurs. Now let's talk about Brennan Johnson. Now, Brennan Johnson should actually have 2 assists because I think that goal versus Chelsea that was ruled out was amazing. And I don't think it should have been ruled out, but it was. But he's played 400 minutes. He's basically played 400 minutes for Spurs. He's got a goal, got an assist. You could argue to have another assist. And you can see he's played centre forward, right wing, left wing, attacking midfield, left mid. He could even fill in the Maddison role if needed. I think he will be best on that left wing. I think that's where he's played a lot this season, that left wing, left mid role. And I think that he will form a good partnership with Son. So let's talk about Brennan Johnson. The Maddison-Son partnership has been probably the highlight of Spurs this season. Son was poor last season, and it's like Maddison's rejuvenated him. So there's that fear. Now Maddison's gone. Will Son drop off? But Son's a fantastic player. Son's a fantastic finisher. Brennan Johnson playing on the left can give Son the ability to stay central where he's going to get more chances to finish the ball, which is where we've seen Son be so good. And Brennan Johnson's the type of guy that will create for Son, that will like to be involved with Son. And I think he'll just generally complement Son because they're so versatile. If Son wants to go to the left, Brennan Johnson can fill in the middle. If Brennan's on the left, Son goes in the middle. And I think, Spurs' big worry was losing Harry Kane. How are they going to score goals? They're scoring more goals because Son, say what you want about Son, but he's one-on-one. There's no player you want more than Son. One-on-one, if you put money on a player to score, it is Son. He is that guy. He's composed. And Brennan Johnson will give Son the ability to stay central and also help create for Son, which we've seen. I think Brennan Johnson's goal and assist was to Son. Unless I'm forgetting things. Okay, my mind's been a bit forgetful lately as well. But Ange Postecoglu said many times he wants his players to attack space. If Son moves out of position, Johnson's there to fill in. Son is obviously Spurs' number 1 presser, but then Johnson's pressing numbers at Forest were brilliant, and that's going to increase pressure on opponents. Why I think Brennan Johnson is quite underrated, and I've always been a big fan of Brennan Johnson, is because people will say, oh, he's a Nottingham Forest player. He's not a Forest player. He's young, he's hungry, he's fast, he's got a great work rate, and he likes to be wide, and that's what Ange Postecoglu wants. He's a system player that suits Ange Postecoglu's system. He's got a brilliant work rate. He's flexible. He's probably, I think he will be good. I think he's good enough to be a starter for Spurs, but even as a bench player, to have someone of that versatility to fill in here and there, you've got someone great, Brennan Johnson. Got 8 goals for Forest last season, first season in the Premier League. I think that's pretty good. 7 non-penalty goals from an XG of 6. So if he's got 8 goals playing regularly for a Nottingham Forest that weren't attacking that much. He has the potential to get 14 goals for Spurs in the season, which is a very good goal record for a winger as well. He can even play in the 10 role behind Son, and he's got that hunger. And I think Brennan Johnson is a player that got a bit of a negative reaction when he joined Spurs and he got injured, and you've not really seen him. But Brennan Johnson, last few games I've watched Spurs, has been very impressive. Like he has. Like in the Chelsea game, he would have got assists, wasn't it? And then he had to come off. He was good in the Palace game. He's showing, we've only seen moments, but we're showing that. For me, I think he's a bright guy for Spurs. So how are Spurs going to sort of move forward now with this injury crisis? Again, I'm not a Spurs fan, so if you're a Spurs fan and you think there's something odd about this lineup, do let me know, because I don't know. But I've sort of put your defence line in with Davies or Dyer having to go next to Romero when he's back. I think Romero misses the next 2 games, which is unfortunate for Spurs. Then you've got the likes of Basuma, Sarr, Bentancur, which I assume will be the midfield 3 with Johnson, Son and Kulu. But potentially you could try Johnson in that Maddison role. I think Lo Celso, might help Spurs, because I think when I watched Spurs versus Wolves, Spurs lacked that creativity and balance in the midfield, which Bentancur should hopefully bring when he comes back from injury, and Johnson has the ability to bring. But I would like to see Lo Celso given a bit more time for Spurs, because I quite liked Lo Celso. Then he was crap, but then he was good, and then he was crap. But I think they're the 2 ways that potentially you can see Spurs. And a lot of people are saying Spurs' season's over. They've lost 2 games in a row. I don't think it's over yet. I think Ange Postecoglu is a smart enough manager to find a way around this. I think the players believe in Ange Postecoglu. I think that Mickey van der Ven is going to be a massive loss, and I think the Spurs need to sign a centre-back in January. But I think they can get around the Maddison injury. 1 game a week as well. I think it's Mickey van der Ven where they're going to struggle, and they need to get another centre-back in. Smash a like, smash a subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.